All right, it's time to talk about ethics in the media. So, sorry, having trouble with PowerPoint today. We all know a big issue with the media today is trust and deceit. Even before our current environment of fake news, the media was having really a lot of problems with trust issues. Part of that has arisen from everyone is in such a hurry to be the first one to report that they're not paying attention to getting the details correctly. And so they're making a lot of mistakes, and that makes them look bad, and then that makes the public not fully trust the media. The other reason people don't fully trust the media is because with the 24/7 news cycle, and that's with cable news networks, they really sensationalize the news story because they're trying to get ratings. They're making money. More ratings equal more money for ads. And so we confuse opinion and sensationalism with actual news. There's a huge difference. And so, the media is having this trust issue, and now it's even more under attack from our current political system. By everyone saying, or people that don't agree with the news say it's fake news, it's made up. And then there's the actual real problem of fake news. And that's come about with social media. People sharing things that aren't true. They look like real news, but they're not. And again, people do that. People create these fake news sites to make money. They're making money off of the advertising. So trust, huge issue. Deceit, another issue. The fake news stories can be so bad that it can cause harm to others. So, connections. It's not just the most important thing in the field of media, making connections. It's the most important thing in your career. Connections are what leads to jobs. It's what leads to advancement, promotion. And in the media, it's what leads to information. Hey, I know so-and-so, and they happen to know about this, so I can go to them as a source, or they can introduce me to a source that I need. So it's all about who you know and keeping those connections in good standing. All right. So plagiarism. We talked a little bit in class the other day, the difference between copyright and plagiarism. And basically I said that, plagiarism is not a legal term. It's an academic term. But it's very similar to copyright in that you're using other people's work without their permission or without giving them credit. So the biggest way to avoid plagiarism is just simply give the credit. Cite your work. Say where you got it from. Don't copy and paste without, giving the information of where you pulled that from. It's called a bibliography. And it's very important, especially in the academic world. But it's also important in the media world. And it's hard to see that, I know, because so much now of what we're used to with news, especially online news, is actually news site generators, to where they're not writing their own content. They're taking things that have been written by the New York Times and Washington Post and NBC or whatever, and they're publishing it on their website. And so we lose sight of the fact that, hey, somewhere someone wrote this content originally, and we need to be aware of that. So you don't want to plagiarize. You don't want people to take your work without credit. And so don't be the person who does that to somebody else. You can even plagiarize yourself. We don't realize this. In the academic world, it is an offense just like you're plagiarizing somebody else. Don't reuse your own work unless you've asked permission, or even like with your readers or your viewers, let them know, hey, I ran this piece a year ago and excerpts from it are relevant now. So you actually cite yourself as a source if you're reusing material. Okay, financial pressures. One of the biggest things in media, again, with trust and deceit, is the money issue. Legacy media, which is traditional newspapers, are struggling. They're having problems financially. So there's more and more pressure. There's always been pressure on any type of media, no matter what the medium, whether it's broadcast or print or web. There's always been pressure from the advertising side of the house. It's about making money. And people will say, I want to place an ad with you, but in return, don't run anything negative that makes us look bad. So there's always that pressure there. If it's a true ethical news site, they will keep the sides of the house separated, advertising and news. But even still, aside from advertising pressures, you have to know what your ethics are, because you may be asked to, maybe there was a donor, somebody that took the whole news staff out to eat for like this really lavish dinner, you know, and then the next week after that, your publisher comes up to you and says, oh, hey, I want you to do this story about this company, so-and-so, and make it, you know, it's supposed to make them look good. It's basically free PR for the company. Well, the person that owns the company is the person that took all of y'all to dinner. And so that could be an ethical dilemma. Technically, it's not ethical. It's not illegal, but it's not ethical. So know your ethics. Know where you stand about things. So also, before we jump into this slide, as far as knowing your ethics and being asked to do stuff you may not be comfortable with, you know, when you're covering a story or a scene, whether it's video or a written piece, there's going to be situations that you may not feel comfortable in, and you need to know how you feel about that and be true to your ethics. You know, if you're, God forbid, you're ever covering like a crisis, whether it's a weather disaster or a car wreck or, you know, a horrible shooting or something, you know, your job is to be there to document what's happening. Of course, don't get in the way of efforts to help people. But at what point, like, do you stand by? Like, if you're first on the scene and there's people there needing medical treatment, do you just solely do your job and take photos and take notes or shoot the video? Or do you stop what you're doing and go try to help the people that need help while you're waiting on the rescue workers to get there? Okay, there's two sides to that story. Some hardcore people will say, you do not leave your post. Your job is to capture the scene regardless of what's going on. The human side of you, the human side of me, says, I've got to go help people if they need help, and help hasn't arrived yet. So know your values. It could cost you your job at some point. But you have to live with yourself. You have to look at yourself in the mirror every day. What do you do? And I always make the joke that this slide about going through these steps, okay, this happens really fast. Okay, when there's a crisis going on or you have to make a quick decision, even if it's not a crisis, you don't have time to go through this huge process in your brain. This kind of happens naturally. So you're naturally going to assess the situation. It's like, okay, what's going on? What are my values? Well, we don't sit there and think, well, what are my values? Is this right? Is this wrong? How do I feel about this? What is this going to mean? It's like, no, do I act or do I not? Okay, is it safe to me? Is the person needing help? Is their life on the line? You know really quickly if you're going to act or not. And I just get tickled at this. Discuss the issue with others. Now, if you're not talking about an emergency situation, just going back to like maybe the thing with the person that paid for dinner for everybody, and you've been asked to do a positive PR piece for them when really maybe they're doing some bad, shady stuff. You do have time to think about, what is the situation? How do I feel about this? What are my values? What do other people think? You have time to do that research to make a decision. But usually you know inherently without having to spend a lot of time. And like this says last thing, pick a line. Basically mark your line in the sand and go with it. Know what's right and wrong for you. Another really, really quick story on this, an actual situation, a couple of situations, and it didn't happen to me, but it happened when I was at the paper, and the other reporter, his first day of work, he got called out to a scene. He heard it on the scanner, and so he went out. It was on a country road, and an elderly lady had been attacked by a pack of dogs. And so he grabbed his stuff and he went out there. He was the first on the scene. And when he got there, he didn't know where the dogs were. He didn't know if it was safe. But the lady was laying in the middle of the road bleeding. And so he ran to her to help her while he was waiting on emergency personnel to get there. He did what he had to do ethically to be able to live with himself. Same guy. About a year later, we were having a lot of really bad wildfires, grass fires, around the city, and he was out covering those, and he was standing over like on one ridge, and he was taking some video of what was happening and some photos, and there were some horses kind of across the way from him. And all of a sudden the wind shifted, so the fire shifted, and the fire started rapidly going toward the horses. And so everybody dropped what they were doing to go try to rescue the horses, including him. So, the hardcore journalist would say, no, you stand back and you capture the footage of the horses being rescued. But in his mind, he's like, I can't stand there and watch, if one horse died and it was my fault, if I had dropped my camera and gone to help, that horse would be alive. I couldn't live with myself. And he got so close to the flames in that instance, when he got back to the office, the soles of his shoes were melted, and he had burn marks on his backpack. So stuff like that does happen, and you have to live with yourself. Okay, so determining your own approach to ethics. I say this all the time in multiple classes. Embrace humanity. Or actually what I say is, be human. Remember that everybody is human. Everybody has value. Treat others with dignity, including animals, even though I know that they're not human. But be empathetic, be sympathetic, and be helpful. Experience is the best teacher. So you may do something that you think you're okay with and you realize you're not. You probably won't do it again. Okay? Understand the impact of your actions. Just like the horses in the fire, he knew if he didn't stop what he was doing to help, one of the horses may have died. And he didn't want to be responsible for that. He understood the impact of his decision. He also understood when he went to go help the lady lying in the road, that he could save her life, but he could also be risking his, because he also could have been attacked at that point. The scene was not secure. And then this says, examine the codes of others. And what this means here is almost every media outlet, no matter what their format or medium, they have their own code of ethics. There's not a nationwide law that regulates media ethics, but most places have their own code, and they ask you to adhere by that. So look at what the code is of where you work. Make sure you can honor that code. Make sure your ethics line up with that code. And then look at others. If you feel like what you're being asked is unreasonable and not ethical, look at other places and see what they require of their people. Okay, so the big three, last slide. Embrace law and ethics. They are your friend. Be legal, be ethical, be nice, be human. I love this one. Just because you can do something, it doesn't necessarily follow that you should. Well, we know that. That's common sense. Just because you can copy and paste somebody else's work, let's not. How about? Okay? And also focus on your readers, or actually just focus on your audience. Earn their trust. Let them know you're a good person. Don't give them reason to doubt you or your motives. So, okay, I hope everybody actually watches this video. And think about how you really feel. Reflect on what your ethics and values are. And I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you in class.